Welcome to the Pelle and Nirov Taylor Show. Well, the news is up and down on the Ukraine conflict, and the latest is that Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, has said that he's going to authorize the use of Storm Shadow missiles. And that, not Storm Shadow missiles, the German equivalent, the Taurus missiles. Now, the Germans have been very reluctant to do that under last Chancellor Scholz, because the Russians have said it's going to mean a state of war between the West and Russia, and Germany, of course. I mean, you know, I don't need to tell you about the invasion of 1941 and all and everything that followed from that. But Merz is made of a different stuff, and he's used the announcement. Apparently, it's been made a while ago, using as a pretext or as a reason the barrage of missiles that the Russians sent into Kiev and other places the last couple of days. The Russians say that is a response to the unprecedented drone attack that came the day before. Now, Trump is saying, or people around Trump are saying, well, we're just tired of this. We're going to move out. I read the Deutsche Welle website. They said, well, Trump is with us. So there's a lot of propaganda going on. All the options are on the table, say the Americans. I think my interpretation is that the Europeans are desperate. They're trying to trap the Americans or Trump into support for an attack on Russia and get the Russians to back down. I don't think Trump wants to play any part of that. And the question is, will Merz fire off these missiles on his own and then get American support in some way or other, perhaps through the deep state working in Kiev or something? Anyway, we're once again at one of those tense moments in this conflict, even as it seems as if Russia is winning and Trump is looking for a way out and for peace. With us to discuss the consequences of a possible escalation is Ola Tunander, a professor or a retired professor from the Peace Research Institute in Oslo. He's written many, many books on security policy, one of Scandinavia's top experts on security policy. And he's just written a book called Hybris, or Hubris in English, which looks specifically at the Ukraine conflict. And it's an excellent book, actually. It's one of the best. I hope it gets translated into English. But he's written one chapter 5 is about the direct consequences, that the series of escalations that could actually ultimately lead to nuclear war. We must never forget that all this could ultimately lead to the obliteration of the planet. As Trump says, if you want global warming, try nuclear war, because it's a real risk. He certainly is not blind or deaf to that. Welcome to show, Ola.
Thank you very much.
What do you think of this latest escalation by Merz? And do you think what will come from it? I mean, you can talk us through the series of escalatory steps that might end up in Armageddon. I mean, we've got to talk about it because our politicians I don't think they're very aware, and they're not very smart. And the consequences could be devastating.
Yeah. No, I think, as now I've read that the Vice Chancellor said there is no change in policy. So you don't know really what Merz, what is really his arguments. And but of course the British had told many times before, you have to use long-range missiles because you have to take out all the Russian military, the ammunition depots and the military forces transported into Ukraine, long time before they entered the Ukraine. So it is, and of course the Russians and Vladimir Putin have said that if they use these missiles, this is then German or British or French attacks on Russia. It's not Ukraine attacks, which means that they will respond by attacking what they say then forces, the German or American or British or French forces somewhere, and possibly in Europe. So that is the case. And of course you could say that if the Germans would use Taurus missiles, which has a longer range than a Storm Shadow, and have the possibility to reach Moscow also, then Russia could take out the factory in Bayern for Taurus missiles, and we don't know yet what will happen, but it's unlikely that they will not do anything. I mean, I think that what they have and what they showed in last November about the use of the Oreshnik missile, which is a middle-range missile that could be both nuclear and non-nuclear. And they used it against Dnipro weapons manufacturing in the oblast of Dnipro, or close the city of Dnipro, actually. And the argument is that these missiles cannot be taken out under no circumstances by Western missile defense, and they have a enormous force, 3 kilometers a second when they attack, when they hit the ground. So this means that they has enormous energy released, kinetic energy released when they hit the ground that could be correspondingly to a small nuclear weapon. So anyway, that's what the Russians have and will very likely use in this case, if the Germans using the Taurus missiles.
Right. I mean, there's an interesting, I saw Shay Bose, who's been on the TNT show several times. He's a Russia Today journalist, or former Irish journalist in Moscow. I think he's quite close to the Kremlin. And I cite him, he said on X that this is a nothing burger. Don't worry about it. Nothing's going to happen. And maybe he's got a steer from the Kremlin. I don't know. He's reading the room there and saying, and also I think the official statement from the Kremlin on Russia Today was that didn't threaten a counterattack, but said this is extremely unhelpful for peace. So it seems to be that, and Shay Bose said, well, you know, it's just a boosted up storm shadow, and we dealt with those very well. Don't, you know, and then he said that the political decision has yet to be signed off on, and that's not going to happen. So again, echoing what you said, that the Social Democrats, I mean, with whom the CDU are in coalition, haven't signed off on it politically. And if they did, it would split the coalition, I think, if Merz pushed it, maybe. So there is opposition. A vice chancellor, is that the same as a finance minister? I mean, does the vice chancellor, it's Klingbeil, who's the most senior Social Democrat minister. I don't know if he also has the post of vice chancellor. Oops. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, so the political decision hasn't yet been taken. Could be just bluff. And even if they did, the Kremlin response, as I read it by Shay Bose and so on, is that they'll try and deal with it as a military issue before they do this performative counteraction. But perhaps because they sense that very much that Trump is on their side now, wants to go ahead with peace. There was a prisoner release now between the Americans and the Russians discussed just today, or agreed on today, between Lavrov and the Americans. And that announcement was going to sort of drown out the Merz announcement. So Trump is making it very clear, the administration, we're still on course, we still want to make peace, we're still talking to the Russians. And of course, lots of American prisoners being freed from Russian jails is going to be one of those photo op stories, you know, and the American media will love that and drown out the Merz story for a couple of days. So I think that's, Trump is sending very clear messages. But of course, if you read the European media, they cherry pick. I mean, Trump said, I might, and then the Wall Street Journal article got a lot of traction. I think it came yesterday. They're very pro-war, run by a British journalist, Emma Tucker, I think. And they're sort of saying, Trump is thinking about escalating all sanctions. And you realize it, and it's someone close to Trump. Well, who the hell is that? You know, is it Kellogg, or is it just some White House intern or something? I mean, close to Trump. No, someone familiar with Trump's thinking. What kind of source is that? You know, whereas when you read what the New York Times said at the same time, which is a more credible outlet, because they're actually pro-liberal. I mean, then they're pro-democrat. They said, well, Trump has said something like, I'm out of here. He said, people very close to Trump said to the Europeans after his outburst on Sunday, he was telling all the Europeans, I'm out of here. I'm tired of this. I'm getting out, no sanctions. And that's what he told the Europeans as well. So I think that my view is that the Russians are going to quieten down for a bit. They've had their attack on Kiev. They don't want to put Trump in trouble with people like, his golfing partner, that idiot, the senator from Carolina. I don't think so. God.
Lieberman, yes.
Yeah, that guy who's has that southern accent, that broad southern accent.
Lieberman.
No. Oh, God. Okay. Anyway, he's the most famous hawk. He was in Kiev in 2014. Anyway,
okay.
I don't think he wants, and he says he has 80 people in Congress willing to vote for a sanctions package from hell or something. Anyway,
I think that the Russians are, it seems, pretty confident that the war on the battlefield is going there in their direction. So you could see that they take 1 square kilometer after the other, or every day, and now they start a new front probably in the north. Putin has taken a decision to have a buffer zone, I think 100 kilometers or something like that inside Ukraine, and that will mean quite a lot of forces going in from the north, which means that the Ukrainians will run the risk of losing, of having has problem with the manpower. So that is because they have to put new forces from Donbass up to the north, for example, which means that they would have, a lot of problem in the east. So that's so that might be that they not will strike back very hard from the Russian side, because they know that the conventional war on the battlefield, that they are winning that.
Right.
So it's let's see, because what they're talking about also is not just 1 or 2 missiles towards Moscow, but quite a few missiles. And what they have done recent days has been to prepare for that by these drone attacks, massive drone attacks, to try to take out the missile defense systems and so on. So it is, we don't know yet, so to speak. Actually.
Obviously, so the Russians are winning. They don't want to rock the boat, as it were. I mean, they certainly don't want European involvement. We'll talk about what the Europeans are trying to achieve here. I mean, they've been trying to trap Trump into sanctions. They want to trap Trump security guarantees. They claim things that Trump later walks out on and backs down from. I mean, at every turn, they talk big words. They were in Kiev, was it last week or something, 2 weeks ago? And that famous incident when on the train there, people thought they were snorting cocaine. Very aggressive, very abusive of the Russians. I mean, not behaving like diplomats of great powers or Europe's great powers at all. All in a way, they're baiting, goading. They want the Russians to react in a certain way, and they want to bring the Americans in some way. This seems to be the latest ploy. We'll talk about that a little bit more after the break. Welcome back to the Pellinero Taylor Show. We've got Ola Tunander with us as Professor Security Studies, one of Scandinavia's top geopolitical analysts. He's just published a book called Hubris, sadly available only in Swedish at the moment, but which covers the Ukraine conflict. So Ola, we're talking about the Merz escalation. So you think that, okay, so they had these massive drone attacks, taking out as much or exhausting Russian air defenses as much as possible, and you think that if they really go for it, they haven't had a political sign-off. There are probably debates going on in Berlin right now. They'll send these storm shadows into Moscow to devastate, I don't know, the Kremlin, or what is it they're trying to do? Are they trying to start a war with Russia?
I mean, what they say is that they want to make the Russian people feel the war. And then they believe that they will turn against their leadership. That didn't happen in the Second World War. I mean, they lost a lot of people. I mean, 25, 27 million or something like that. And they haven't lost 1 million yet in Russia. So I think it's a lot of wishful thinking on the European side. They believe that the Russian leadership will collapse. That's the only thing they could hope for. And I don't think it will happen. So it is, in that sense, you could say that if you escalate, then the risk of attacks inside Russia will increase, and then they will have people that are not happy with the war in Russia. That is the logic in a way. But I think I don't think the Russians primarily think in that way. They realize or believe that it is a major threat from outside, and they rather unite in this kind of occasion.
And this incredible, it's as if the Germans don't realize, I mean, have they forgotten all their history? The Germans were famously the one nation, unlike, say, the Japanese or the British, haven't learned the lessons of colonization, let alone the Russians with their experience of Stalin. The Germans were the ones who talk about the Holocaust and Nazism day and night. Now people are talking about on social media about Merz, the Fourth Reich, the Germans up to their old games again, and here they are. That's exactly why the Social Democrats, the last government, didn't want to escalate against Russia, because they knew the history. They knew the singular factor. The Russians are still this latent fear and hatred of the Germans, as there never was against the Americans, and maybe not even the British. I mean, it's just so leaden. It's just so incredible. It's almost as if Merz is working for the Russians somehow. And of course, all over Europe, there'll be people thinking about Fourth Reich and very uncomfortable with the Germans mobilizing. And the other thing is that the Germans talking about war in 2 or 3 years' time, but they don't have any military at the moment. So what's going to happen if Merz fires these missiles off and Russia fires missiles back into Berlin or takes out one small thing? The Germans don't have the ground forces or anything to counter against the Russians.
But I think that what you could have learned from the present conflict in Donbass and so on is that you take very little every day. You take very much manpower. It's a killing field, so to speak, but it's not. You don't move the forces. The ground forces or army forces, you don't move them forward very much, actually. So, and that the Russians would move into Poland or into any other Western country is I think, totally idiotic, actually. I think this is not going to happen, and but they will take out American or British air bases, for example, and they may take out industrial plants, the military industry, like this Taurus missile production facilities and so on. So it is and they have a lot of very, very capable missiles. They have aircraft also, but this is not. They are not dominating So they will not dominating the airspace or something like that, but they have more missiles than anyone else.
Does the West, do they realize that Russia's got these missiles? I mean, they've got missile technology that is light years ahead of the Americans. And yet I heard somebody who's a technical expert at a top Swedish university says, oh, the Russians have proved such a disappointment with their equipment in this conflict. And I thought this represents some kind of consensus view in the Swedish military industrial complex. Then Sweden is in real trouble because they're underestimating their adversary.
Yeah, no, true. I think you have had a lot of that in Norway also, actually. It is they don't realize the capabilities because the Russians haven't used much of their capabilities. So it is they have tried to avoid escalation. And in that sense, the British and Swedes or whatever just think that they are not capable of doing anything. And I think that is a big mistake, actually. So it is, but the problem is, if you would have an escalation with the Western missile attacking Russia or going in towards Moscow, for example, and Russia hits back with Oreshnik missiles on bases in Britain or in Scandinavia or in Poland, and they destroy very much, actually. Then of course, how would the Western countries respond to that? If they, of course, they could say that we accept a peace deal or something like that. But at present, they consider Russia as an aggressor, and they have to hit back. That is their view, and this would lead to a major escalation. And it seems to me that it's more likely that the Western countries will escalate to nuclear war. That the British, for example, would escalate to nuclear war because they have no non-nuclear weapons to respond to these Oreshnik missiles. On the other hand, if they, for example, would have a massive air attack on Russia from European countries, from Finland, from Poland, and so on, then maybe Russia would use nuclear weapons. But it's I think they are also on the Western side are a bit hesitant in this case.
Incredible. It's incredible that we got here. Don't you think, I mean, the Russians did strike back against Taurus missiles. Don't you think they would just hit Germany? I mean, if they hit the British, they'd involve the British. The thing is, I think that the Germans want to involve the Americans, right? So wouldn't they the Russians do everything to avoid hitting the Americans?
I mean, they will, I think I spoke about it before, but it have this similarity of the Bay of Pigs operation when the CIA wanted to involve the army force, the military forces, and he believed, Alan Dulles, as the head of the CIA, believed that if you start an attack on Cuba and it's not perfectly successful, Kennedy will back down and say, okay, we put in the military forces, the Navy, and so on, or the Marines. And he didn't. He said no. And of course, everyone else was furious, and Kennedy was furious because Alan Dulles had promised that it wouldn't be any problem, because he said that people in Cuba will raise up and support the CIA. But it didn't happen. And the same, you could say, will happen here, that the Europeans are trying to involve the American military forces. And they will very likely, the Americans won't do anything. So it's a, and now they don't
it's worrying. Yeah.
They don't even have a vice president who will go on into this. I mean, that would have been the case last Trump administration, and of course that is what happened in 1962-63 with Lyndon Johnson taking over, and he was on board for the military strikes, and but I don't think that is the case today.
So Vance is our guarantee that Trump won't be assassinated like Kennedy was, because Kennedy signed his death warrant in the Bay of Pigs. The CIA were out for him after that. Trump has already survived assassination attempts, but if he was to do a Kennedy, as it were, on this new Bay of Pigs, even killing Trump wouldn't save the situation from the neocon point of view, because they'd get Vance, who's just as peace-minded, unlike as his boss, unlike back in '63. Anyway, we've got to end there. Ola Tunander, thank you so much. History repeats itself, or rhymes, as they say, and we should learn from it. Thank you so much. This is the Pelle Taylor Show, and we'll be back after the break.
Thank you.
Thank you.